readers, and welcome to the first 10 pages. Today I'm going to be doing A Tale of Dark and Grimm by Gidwitz, and I know I just did a review on it, but it's a library book, so gotta hurry it up. So basically, if you haven't been to the first 10 pages before, I read the first 10 pages of a book in hopes that it will inspire you to want to pick up the book and go read it yourself if you're maybe on the fence. That's kind of my concept with the first 10 pages and my thought process about it. So without further ado, let's get right into it. This is because there's just such pretty. Okay. Once upon a time, fairy tales were awesome. I know. You don't believe me. I don't blame you. A little while ago, I wouldn't have believed it myself. Little girls in red caps skipping around the forest? Awesome? I don't think so. But then I started to read them. The real Grimm ones? Very few little girls in red caps in those. Well, there's one, but she gets eaten. Okay, you're saying, if fairy tales are awesome, why are all the ones I've heard so unbelievably mind-numbingly boring? You know how it is with stories. Someone tells a story, then somebody repeats it, and it changes. Someone else repeats it, and it changes again. Then someone's telling it to their kid and taking out all the scary, bloody scenes, in other words, the awesome parts. And the next thing you know, the story's about an adorable little girl in a red cap skipping through the forest to take cookies to her granny. And you're so bored you've passed out on the floor. The real Grimm stories are not like that. Take Hansel and Gretel, for example. Two greedy little children try to eat a witch's house, so she decides to cook and eat them instead, which is fair, it seems to me. But before she can follow through on her perfectly reasonable plan, they lock her in an oven and bake her to death. Why? Which is pretty cool, you have to admit. But maybe it's not awesome. Except, and here's the thing, that's not the real story of Hansel and Gretel. You see, there's another story in Grimm's fairy tales, a story that winds all throughout that moldy, mysterious tome, like a trail of breadcrumbs winding through a forest. It appears in tales you may have never heard, like Faithful Johann's and Brother and Sister, and in some of that you have Hansel and Gretel, for instance. It is the story of two children, a girl named Gretel and a boy named Hansel, traveling through a magical and terrifying world. It is the story of two children striving and failing and then not failing. It is the story of two children finding out the meanings of things. Before I go on, a word of warning. Grimm stories, the ones that weren't changed for little kids, are violent and bloody. And what you're going to hear now, the one true tale in the Tales of the Grimm, is as violent and bloody as you can imagine. Really. So if such things bother you, we should probably stop right now. You see, the land of Grimm can be a harrowing place, but it is worth exploring. For in life it is in the darkest ones finds the brightest beauty and the most luminous wisdom. And of course, the most blood. Faithful Johann's. Once upon a time, in a kingdom called Grimm, an old king lay on his deathbed. He was Hansel and Gretel's grandfather, but he didn't know that, for neither Hansel nor Gretel had been born yet. Now, hold on a minute. I know what you're thinking. I'm well aware that nobody wants to hear the story that happens before the main characters show up. Stories like that are boring, because they all end exactly the same way, with the main character showing up. But don't worry, this story is like no story you've heard before. You see, Hansel and Gretel don't just show up at the end of the story. They show up, and then they get their heads cut off. Just thought you'd like to know. The old king knew he was soon to pass from this world, and so he called for his oldest and most faithful servant. The servant's name was Johann. But he had served the king's father, and his father's father, and his father's father, so loyally that all called him Faithful Johann. Johann tottered in on both legs, heaving his crooked back step by step and leering with his one good eye. His long nose sniffed at the air, his mouth puckered around two rotten teeth. But despite his grotesque appearance, when he came within view, the old king smiled and said, "Ah, Johann," and drew him near. The king's voice was weak as he said, "I am soon to die, But before I go, you must promise me 2 things. First, promise that you will be as faithful to my young son as you have been to me." Without hesitation, Johann promised. Second, promise that you will show him his entire inheritance, the castle, the treasures, all this fine land, except for one room. Do not show him the room with the portrait of the Golden Princess. For if he sees the portrait, he will fall madly in love with her, and I fear it will cost him his life. The king gripped Johann's hand. "Promise me." Again, Johann's promised. Then the wrinkles of worry left the king's brow, and he closed his eyes and breathed his last breath. Soon the prince was crowned as the new king. He was celebrated with parades and toasts and feasts all throughout the kingdom. But when the revelry finally abated, Johann sat him down for a talk. First, Johann described to him all the responsibilities of the throne. The young king tried not to fall asleep. Then he explained that the old king had asked him to show the young king his entire inheritance, the castle, the treasures, all this fine land. At the word treasures, the young king's face lit up. Not that he was greedy, it was just that he found the idea of the treasures exciting. Finally, Johann tried to explain his own role to the young king. "I have served your father, and your father's father, and your father's father before that," Johann said. He started calculating on his fingers how that was even possible. But before he could get very far, Johann had moved on. "They called me faithful Johanns because I have devoted my life to the kings of Grimm, to helping them, to advising them, to understanding them." "Understanding them?" the young king asked. "No, understanding them, in the ancient sense of the word. Standing beneath them, supporting them, bearing their troubles and their pains on my shoulders." The young king thought about this. "So you will understand me too?" he asked. "I will." "No matter what?" "Under any circumstances." "That is what being faithful means." "Well, understand that I am tired of this, and would like to see the treasures now." The young king stood up. Faithful Johann shook his head and sighed. They began by exploring every inch of the castle, the treasure crypts, the towers, and every single room. Every single room, that is, save one. The one room remained locked, no matter how many times they passed it. Well, the young king was no fool. He noticed this, and so he asked, "Why is it, Johann, that you have shown me every room in this palace, but never this room?" Johann squinted his one good eye and curled up his puckered two-toothed mouth. Then he said, "Your father asked me not to show you that room, Your Highness. He feared it might cost you your life." I'm sorry. I need to stop for a moment. I don't know what you're thinking right now, but when I first heard this part of the story, I thought, what is he, crazy? Or maybe you know something about young people and maybe you don't. I have been one myself once upon a time, know a few things about them. One thing I know is that if you don't want one to do something, for example, go into a room where is a portrait of an unbearably beautiful princess, saying, quote, unquote, "it might cost you your life," is about the worst thing you can possibly say. Because then that's all that young person will want to do. I mean, why didn't Johann say something else like, "It's a broom closet"? Why? You want to see a broom closet? Or, "It's a fake door for decoration." Or even, "It's the ladies' bathroom, Your Majesty. Best not go poking your head in there." Any of those would have been perfectly sufficient as far as I can tell. But he didn't say any of those things if he had none of the horrible bloody events to follow would ever have happened. Well, in that case, I guess I'm glad he told the truth. "Cost my life," the young king proclaimed, with a toss of his head. "Nonsense!" He insisted he be let into this room. First he demanded, but Johann refused. Then he commanded, still Johann refused. Then he threw himself on the floor and he had a fit, which was very unbecoming of a young man the king's age. Finally, faithful Johann realized that there was little he could do. So wrinkling his old malformed face into a wince, he unlocked the open door. The king burst into the room. He found himself staring face to face with the most beautiful portrait of the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. Her hair looked like it was spun from pure gold thread. Her eyes flashed like the ocean on a sunny day, and yet around her lips there was a hint of sadness, of loneliness. The young king took one look and he fainted dead away. And that is page 10. What? That's actually a good place to stop and end it there. And my apologies. My camera died. You obviously won't know this, but my camera died, and in between that time of it dying and having to recharge it, I had to go do the lawn, and now all that stuff is in my lungs. So if I sound more stuffy or weirder now, that is why. And also, husband had to get a shower, and there are landscaping people outside. So all this craziness happened in between. So I apologize if towards the end it was a little shitty. But anyways, that is the end of A Tale Dark and Grim. I hope you enjoyed the first 10 pages, and I hope you inspired you to go read it, because it really is a fun and enjoyable read. And I'll see you all for the next first 10 pages. Make sure to thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and if you have any books that you want me to read the first 10 pages of, let me know. Bye! The king burst into the room. He found himself staring face to face with the most beautiful portrait of the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. Her hair looked like it was spun from pure gold thread. Her eyes flashed like the ocean on a sunny day, and yet around her lips there was a hint of sadness, of loneliness. The young king took one look and he fainted dead away. And that is page 10. What? That's actually a good place to stop and end it there. And my apologies. My camera died. You obviously won't know this, but my camera died, and in between that time of it dying and having to recharge it, I had to go do the lawn, and now all that stuff is in my lungs. So if I sound more stuffy or weirder now, that is why. And also, husband had to get a shower, and there are landscaping people outside. So all this craziness happened in between. So I apologize if towards the end it was a little shitty. But anyways, that is the end of A Tale Dark and Grim. I hope you enjoyed the first 10 pages, and I hope you inspired you to go read it, because it really is a fun and enjoyable read. And I'll see you all for the next first 10 pages. Make sure to thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and if you have any books that you want me to read the first 10 pages of, let me know. Bye!